Welcome to NACD's BoardVision, where leading boardroom advisors, governance professionals, and seasoned directors discuss critical issues related to your responsibilities in the boardroom. I'm Peter Gleason, Managing Director of the National Association of Corporate Directors. I'm joined today by Catherine Bromilow in New York. Catherine is a partner in PwC's Center for Board Governance, which helps directors meet the challenges of their critical role. Today's topic is the coming proxy season with a focus on shareholder advisory votes on compensation, better known as Say on Pay. Thanks for joining us, Catherine.
Thank you, Peter. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, Catherine, proxy season is upon us. At NACD, we're already getting the media calls to comment on the latest shareholder proposals and the newest disclosures around director and, of course, executive compensation. It's just that time of the year. Having spent the last 20 years in corporate governance, annual meeting season always brings about some interesting headlines, a few proxy battles, and more than a few contentious issues. But this year will be different and may impact the governance world for years to come. The main reason? Say on Pay. The Dodd-Frank Act now gives shareholders of almost all public companies an advisory vote on executive compensation packages. With the potential for proxy access looming in the background, this could make serving on the Compensation Committee a very interesting job. Catherine, what are you hearing from the boards that you've talked with, and what's your opinion on just how big a deal this is?
Well, Peter, it is a big deal. However, it really represents an evolution that has been a long time coming. As you recall, right after Sarbanes-Oxley, almost a decade ago, shareholders of New York Stock Exchange-listed companies got a say on all new equity plans. Then, in 2008, companies that took TARP funds had to provide a say-on-pay vote for their executive comp plans. Meanwhile, a few dozen or so other companies had voluntarily adopted say-on-pay over the past few years in response to shareholder proposals. But here's the change. This year, the say-on-pay vote is required for all public companies in the U.S. This means that your shareholders will have a chance to tell you what they think of the CEO's pay package. Almost without exception now, boards and CEOs we speak with tell us that this has surely gotten their attention, and they're trying to figure out the extent to which they should be entering direct dialogue with their shareholders on this issue.
I remember when Say on Pay was in its infancy, and its supporters were hoping that it would promote significant dialogue between the company and its shareholders. I know from our survey that a large portion of directors also agree that a board should hold regular meetings with major shareholders. I'm all for enhancing the dialogue, but Catherine, I'm not sure that this vote on compensation is the best route to get it. So what are the potential implications of this vote?
Although it's just an advisory vote, if the vote fails, there is possible reputational damage for directors, and you will draw additional scrutiny to your pay practices. Plus, you will have to describe in the next proxy how the board responded to the vote. That said, it's just far better for boards to avoid having a vote fail at all. And this really points to the need for an effective communication strategy as much as a carefully designed executive compensation plan.
So really, we're talking about more proactive dialogue and better disclosures for shareholders. Do you see any related issues stemming from Say on Pay?
Yes, probably in two areas. First, this vote gives proxy advisory firms more influence. The Compensation Discussion and Analysis, or CD&A section, of proxies is incredibly complex, and it's going to be a challenge for shareholders to digest the sheer volume of information. Accordingly, many may be more likely to rely on the recommendations to either approve or reject the pay package that are coming from the proxy advisors. Additionally, in the UK, where they've had say-on-pay votes since 2003, it's become much more common a practice for the Compensation Committee chairs to meet with major shareholders to discuss compensation philosophy and practices. Now, there seems to be a reluctance to embrace this practice in the U.S., but U.S. shareholders may actually begin to push for such interaction.
The proxy advisors are going to play a very interesting role in all this, as you mentioned. It's going to be interesting to see how they handle the compensation analysis themselves, as they'll be looking at and opining on the pay packages of roughly 5,000 publicly traded companies over the course of the next 4 months. As you mentioned, with the complexity of the CD&As, it's going to take a lot to get this done right and on time. In terms of the compensation chair's meeting with major shareholders, we think this can be beneficial, but we believe it needs to be a coordinated effort by the management team, the board, and the company's legal counsel. Companies really need to set a policy for communications, knowing who will talk on behalf of the company And we firmly believe the council should be present to make sure that no one runs up against a Reg FD issue. As I said at the outset, proxy season brings forward a host of issues that boards will have to deal with. What are the other issues that you're focused on, Catherine?
We are hearing that some of the more common shareholder proposals from recent years will be resurfacing. For example, while approximately 70% of S&P 500 companies have voluntarily adopted majority voting, our sources tell us that certain institutional shareholders will be proposing such policies at more mid-cap companies. Another area of focus is board leadership, and we expect to see more proposals calling for the separation of the CEO and the board chair roles. You'll probably remember that board leadership structure was one of the many new governance disclosures that companies had to make beginning with the 2010 proxy season.
Without a doubt, separation of chair and CEO issue is always front and center, along with renewed call for greater diversity on boards. Okay, I want to leave the audience with a few takeaways. Can you give me 3 or 4 things a board member can immediately do to make sure they're prepared to address say on pay?
For say on pay, directors can make sure that the CD&A communicates effectively to shareholders. Say, consider these 3 factors. 1, is there a clear, concise executive summary that allows the reader to easily understand the company's compensation philosophy and practices? 2, does the CD&A explain why the company's peer group makes sense? And 3, does it describe how the pay package aligns with both the company's performance and shareholder value?
Great. Now how about a few takeaways for some of the other shareholder proposals we discussed?
With respect to the other recurring kinds of shareholder proposals, make sure that management is keeping the lines of communication open with major shareholders to understand their concerns and perspectives. And this could indicate a need to consider making changes in your own policy or disclosure. So on an issue like majority voting, it might be worth a discussion at the board level as to whether or not the board wants to voluntarily adopt it and what the pros and cons could be. Disclosure is also important, so take the board leadership issue. It actually may be worth re-examining whether the proxy clearly articulates the board's reasoning in the event that you actually have the CEO and board chair roles combined.
Catherine, great insights as always, and thanks for joining me today on NACD BoardVision to discuss say on pay and the upcoming proxy season. For more information on this topic, visit NACD's BoardVision page and PwC's Center for Board Governance website. On behalf of NACD and PwC, thanks for joining us.